host, Dave Ribeiro from SteelersSanctuary.com. And today we have Tony Pauline back with us on the show. He's a draft insider for the Pro Football Network. Tony, how you doing today?
I'm okay. Good to be back with you.
Great to have you, man. Before we get to specific players, I was coming through your mock draft, and it's the Steelers are in kind of a weird spot, right? Yeah. Some of their biggest needs are corner and tackle and defensive tackle, and those all seem to be off the board by the time 17 rolls around, right? Even in your mock, you have that way.
Yeah, they're in a tough spot. I guess they're in a tough spot. I mean, all the offensive tackles, I project all the top offensive tackles, I project to be off the board. We can talk about more later on. I don't think there's going to be any defensive tackle there unless somehow Jalen Carter, drops to 17, and then you got to make a decision on that one. I have Bryan Bresee, who I had in my first mock draft going to the Steelers. I have the Jets taking him at 13. Cornerbacks, it's a question of, is that fourth cornerback, worth the 17th pick of the draft? And the Steelers will have to make that decision. But yeah, I think that they are in a difficult spot, and their prime needs will be off the board. It's just a matter of, are they comfortable with the players who are there, or are they given any opportunities to trade back because a team may want to trade up for somebody?
We've talked about that a lot in the podcast. Them trading back seems to be a smart move. It's not something they often do, but it's a new top of the general manager, a new scouting staff. So maybe they will do that. I'm not sure.
You got to remember, in order to trade back, somebody's got to want to trade up. So, yeah, and you don't trade back just for the sake of trading back. You got to get good value in return for how far you're trading down.
Let's start with cornerback. You had him taking Deonte Banks, who's a pretty good prospect. How far off is he from the top three? The Witherspoons and the Joey Porter Juniors.
Christian Gonzalez, who's my top rated cornerback. There's a huge difference between those two. I mean, you look at Gonzalez, you look at Devin Witherspoon, even Joey Porter. Those guys have a large body of work. Deonte Banks played well for 1 year. Now, he was terrific last year at Maryland, but he doesn't have that same body of work, so there's a little bit more risk there. He played incredibly well. He's much more than a real good athlete that we saw at the Combine. He's got terrific size. He's a confident guy. He showed good ball skills. What I think people who look at my mock draft should kind of also focus on is that little nugget of information I put on there that, Mike Tomlin has a personal relationship with Deonte Banks prior to this whole draft process. So he knows Deonte Banks very well, and oftentimes that goes a long way. And, just to go back to what we said before, it's a situation where the top three corners on my board, Gonzalez, Witherspoon, and Porter, are off the board when the Steelers selected at 17, which is not unusual because cornerback is a position of priority come draft day, and we often see corners go much earlier. Look at Jeffrey Okudah, how early he went. Now he's being traded for basically a sack of beans.
It's crazy.
Because it is such a priority position.
Let's talk about a couple of later round guys that the Steelers have had in their pre-draft visits. Julius Brent's kind of an interesting guy. Tested pretty well, a little slower, like a 4.5, I think he ran. I watched him against the TCU wide receiver, Johnston. He didn't look very good in that game. What are your thoughts on Julius Brent?
It was up and down in that game. Julius Brent is a project. I mean, he's a guy who has got the size, he's got the speed, 4.53. I mean, everyone's running 4.3s and 4.4s today. 4.53 is plenty fast enough. Plus, he plays fast. He's physical. He's a good athlete, but he's very unpolished. He struggles making plays with his back to the ball. If you saw in that championship game against TCU where he got beaten by Quentin Johnson a couple times, he shows more flashes than he does consistency. I think Brent is a guy, he comes off the board in round 2, maybe early round 3. He's going to need some time, but he's the guy that's got a great amount of upside. It's sort of like a Deonte Banks sort of situation, but Banks really played well in 2022 consistently, where Brent's played well in spurts in 2022.
How about Tyrique Stevenson? I don't know a heck of a lot about him. He tested okay at the Combine. Steelers had him in for a visit as well.
Yeah, I mean, started his career at Georgia, sort of kind of played safety, played corner. He's athletic. He's explosive. He shows those dominant flashes like Julius Brents. He's probably a little bit more consistent, gets a little mixed, gets a little haphazard in his movements, can be all over the place. I like his upside. I have him graded just slightly lower than Julius Brents. I think he can be a real good pro, Tyrique Stevenson, but it's going to take time. I mean, you're going to have to put him in nickel packages and basically have him feel his way out. He's not a guy that you're going to rely to start on early in his NFL career.
Now, the big knock on Emmanuel Forbes, who the Steelers also had in, is the weight, right? 166 pounds, real small guy. He's got a pretty good frame, right? 6'1", so I guess he could put on more weight and eventually a lot of production from his college days.
Yeah, but if he puts on more weight, is that going to affect his speed? Is it going to affect his quickness? Is it going to affect his flexibility? I mean,
true.
A lot of people have Emmanuel Forbes as a first-round pick. I have him as a third-round pick. And the reason is because of that. 6 foot, 1/2 inch, 166 pounds at the combine. I think it was 170 pounds at his pro day, but he didn't run. This is the day and age where, you got to fight in the NFL. That you got to fight to defend those passes. You talk about the receivers coming away with a contested grab. Mm-hmm. Well, you need a defensive back to make that a contested throw to come away with. Never mind, cornerbacks are very active in run support. I just don't know how a guy that's 170 pounds on a good day is going to hold up. Now, you bring up a good point. 6 foot, 1/2 inch. He's going to need to put on 15 to 20 pounds. But is he going to be the same player when he puts on that 15 to 20 pounds?
Yeah, that's a good point. One last one. Riley Moss. The Steelers seem to have shown a little bit of interest in him. Had him for a dinner at the pro day. What do you think about him?
I like Riley Moss a lot. I mean, Riley Moss, if you watch the Iowa film, he was a shutdown corner. He tested reasonably well at the combine, though I think people thought he was going to be a little bit faster. 6 foot, 1/2 inch, 194 pounds. And he's been a good player at Iowa for a couple of seasons. I mean, he came back for his second senior year and the gamble paid off. I think he's a little bit underrated. I'm going to kind of, step out here. And Jim Nagy said this, there's not a big market for white corners in the league, which you hate to say that, but Riley Moss is a real good player and he's a good athlete. And I think he's one of those guys that are going to slide into the third round. And then 2 or 3 years down the road, people can be like, why wasn't this guy a late first, early second round choice?
He had the production too, right? I think I saw 11 interceptions in his career at Iowa. Pretty good.
And it was more than it's more than him being opportunistic. He is a good cornerback.
We're just going to go to safety real quick. I don't think the Steelers are going to draft a safety per se, but Brian Branch.
Yeah.
He's kind of, to me, didn't test well.
Nope.
He's not a real big guy. I don't know where he plays in the NFL. I guess slot corner is his best.
I mean, he's 5'11 and a half, 190 pounds. So, I mean, he's a monster compared to, say, Malcolm,
True.
Emmanuel Forbes, right?
Forbes, yeah.
And you're right. He didn't test that well. He ran in the mid 5'5", 4.5s to the high 4.5s. But this is a situation, in my opinion, where you got to separate playing speed from 40 speed. Because Brian Branch has been one of the best safeties I've seen come out of Alabama in a long time. And I mean, more than just a run defending safety, a guy who can go sideline to sideline and play center field, a guy who can play over the slot receiver, a guy who can do so many things so well. It's this 40 time at the combine that's going to prevent him from being a mid first round choice, maybe being a first round pick altogether. But I think some team is going to get a steal with him. I think you can play him as a true free safety. I think you can use him over the slot receiver. You can play him as a nickel corner. A lot of skill there. And again, even after, and I was at that workout, even after the poor 40 time, his defensive back drills were, right there with Christian Gonzalez of Oregon, who had one of the best days during the position drills. I mean, he stepped up the speed. He stepped up the quickness from his 40 time during those position drills. So you get nothing but love for Brian Branch from me.
Okay, so you think it'd be like a steal if the Steelers took him at like 32 because they have that extra pick from the Bears?
If they need him, I think it would be. I absolutely think it would be. And, the Giants, Landon Collins was a guy who a lot of people projected as a first round pick, fell into round 2. Initially swiped up by the New York Giants, then made his way to the Washington Redskins, had a real good career.
All right, let's flip over to offensive tackle. Again, it's the same. They're at the same boat. Paris Johnson and Broderick Jones are probably off the board. Even maybe Darnell Wright has gotten some love earlier in the drafts. Where do the Steelers go if those two guys are off the board? I mean, they've shown some interest in DeJuan Jones. He's more of a second round type guy, I think.
Yeah. I mean, well, if those two guys are off the board, the question is Darnell Wright their guy at 17? Is Darnell Wright worth the 17th pick of the draft? Probably. Do they want to draft a guy that's going to come in and play right tackle as opposed to left tackle? That's a decision they're going to have to make. I think that is a real possibility for the Steelers at 17. Excuse me. Darnell Wright is, if you watch him play, he's got an NFL body. He's a big, thick guy. He's nasty. He's fundamentally sound. I think he tested better than anyone would have ever imagined. At the combine, ran 5.01. He's 333 pounds. I was talking to people in his camp yesterday. They think that Darnell Wright will eventually be 345 pounds, but be 17% body fat. He's got that type of upside. So, the question is, how are they really looking for an upgrade at right tackle? Because I don't believe Darnell Wright is a left tackle. And that will be the question at 17. DeJuan Jones is falling down draft boards. I think it would be good value for them in round 2 if DeJuan Jones is making football a priority. I mean, DeJuan Jones had a decent, not spectacular career at Ohio State. He had one phenomenal day of practice at the Senior Bowl, and then he packed it in. Didn't practice the next 2 days, didn't play in the game, went to the combine, ran the 40, did position drills. I was at the Ohio State Pro Day with Mike Tomlin and those guys, and they were very pissed off because DeJuan Jones did nothing at Pro Day, did not get on the scale, did not sign the consent form, hung around in gray sweats, and did absolutely nothing. And that's really not a way to endear yourself to people who are going to select you and sign you to a contract for millions of dollars by, just standing around and talking to people. So I think with DeJuan Jones, you don't know what you're getting, but the upside is greater than the downside risk when you get in the later part of round 2.
Yeah, there's some speculation with him that the weight's kind of an issue, right? That's why I didn't weigh in at the Ohio State Pro Day. And I think Tomlin, it was reported, even kind of clapped back at him at the Pro Day dinner saying, why didn't you weigh in? You should have weighed in. So you're right. I think the Steelers weren't too happy with what he did at his Pro Day.
He did nothing at his Pro Day. So yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't know if you saw it, but Darnell Wright clapped back at somebody on Twitter about not being able to play left tackle. He seems to think that he can play left tackle in the NFL. I don't know.
Well, they all do. I mean, why not? And you know what? You'd rather have that sort of attitude.
Absolutely.
The DeJuan Jones attitude, that sort of laissez-faire. Okay, look at my tape from the one day at Senior Bowl practice. You'd rather have that. I don't think Darnell Wright's going to be able to play left tackle in the NFL. But good for him. Teams want to see that attitude. They want to see a guy that, stands up for himself and said, you know what? You don't think I can do this? I'm going to show you.
Agreed. I wanted to ask you about Blake Freeland. You had him higher in your rankings than I've seen in most. What do you like about Blake Freeland?
Well, I mean, you got to love the athleticism. I mean, 6'8", 302 pounds. I mean, what was he, a 37.5-inch vertical jump, I think, at the combine. Very, very athletic. A lot of upside, fundamentally sound as well. DeJuan Jones is a big guy who plays, uses his size as an advantage. Blake Freeland is the guy who bends his knees, good with his hand, zone blocking prospect, had a great pro day workout at the BYU pro day. So with DeJuan Jones, it's a situation, with Blake Freeland, it's the opposite situation of DeJuan Jones in a sense that the guy seems to want to play football. He's not big enough. Blake Freeland, he's got to get bigger. He's got to add bulk to that 6'8" frame, 6'8" frame, to get stronger, to basically neutralize the power on the NFL level. And that oftentimes is an easier thing to do than trying to go from being a 380-pound offensive lineman down to 360 or 355 pounds. So I think with Freeland, you take him in day 2. I have him as a second-round pick. Maybe he goes in a third round. But, you look at the league, and I mean, the league wants more of those athletic, mobile guys. You look at, what the Philadelphia Eagles have done. Their left tackles and right tackles are interchangeable. That's the type of guy that Blake Freeland is.
Okay, let's flip over to defensive tackle. It's the same story again. There's no way Jalen Carter gets out of the top 10, right? Even with his off-field stuff.
We'll find out. I mean, is there no way? I mean, there absolutely is a way. I mean, we've seen this before. I do a show every week with Trey Wingo, the former ESPN host, and I mentioned, when his agent is out there saying, we're not going to interview with teams outside the top 10, and we're not going to take visits to teams outside the top 10. That's occupational suicide. I mean, that's stupid. And I go back to, people may remember a guy by the name of Andre Rison, a receiver out of Michigan State in 1989. He had the same attitude. He was supposed to be a top 10 pick. There were teams that wanted to work him out, teams that wanted to meet with him who were outside the top 10. He said, screw that. I'm not going to do that. I won't be there when you draft. He ended up as a 22nd pick of round 1. So it not only hurts because he may not be selected with teams outside the top 10, it will also hurt that, if he starts to slide down and say the New York Jets or the Pittsburgh Steelers are interested in moving from 17 up into the top 10 to get Jalen Carter, well, we never interviewed the guy. The guy wouldn't sit down and talk with us. Why are we going to give away all this draft capital to move up and get someone who thinks he's better than us? So I think there is a chance he can slide out of the top 10, especially now with Detroit making that trade. And the fact is, Detroit now needs a cornerback. They may look away from Jalen Carter.
That's a good point.
He could slide out. And I think it also hurts him more so for teams that are outside the top 10 who maybe will want to move up to get. I mean, the Philadelphia Eagles are sitting there at 10. They don't need a lot of help. Could they use Jalen Carter? Yeah, sure. But, you look at Howie Roseman, he's a guy who likes to move around. So if Jalen Carter's sitting there at 10, how many teams are going to be calling the Philadelphia Eagles, say, hey, listen, we want to move up and get Jalen Carter, even though he wouldn't come and visit us?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because the Steelers, there was a rumor this week, the Steelers were talking to the Chicago Bears at 9 as a possible trade up. But, who knows how true that is. But I would imagine Jalen Carter would be one of the guys that they would be trading up for if that has any shred of truth to it. You know what I'm saying?
Or one of the left tackles.
Oh, the tackle. Yeah. Like a Paris Johnson type too. Yeah.
Or Broderick Jones. Yes.
Yep. All right. If Jalen Carter is out of the mix, I like Brian Brisset a lot. I know you do too. It's a stretch maybe to think he makes it to 17, depending on who you talk to too. It's like, that one's a tough one.
Yeah, I mean, I have him going 13 to the New York Jets. I think the New York Jets are also in a similar situation, like the Pittsburgh Steelers, in the sense that the Jets need a left tackle, but I don't think the left tackles are going to be there. They don't need a whole lot. They do need a defensive tackle. And, I know Brisset had a tough 2022 season, but a lot of the reasons really were not his fault. I mean, his sister died of brain cancer. Yep. He had a kidney infection. It wasn't of his own doing, say, the way we just talked about Jalen Carter, who's brought a lot of this stuff on himself. So you go back and you watch the 2021 film where Brian Brisset was unstoppable. I mean, he was a terrific player for 2 years at Clemson before he hit that bump in the road in 2022. So I think, you got to look at the player's body of work. And coming into the season, a lot of people thought Brian Brisset is a top 10 pick, a top 10 prospect. You can't just go off of the 2022 film, especially after what he went through.
Absolutely. A couple of guys later in the rounds, Mazi Smith. I think we brought him up last time we talked. I kind of like him. He's a bigger defensive tackle. Some of these guys are right on the edge of 300 pounds. He's definitely well over and still maintains some athleticism with that big frame too, right?
Incredibly athletic. I mean, I like Mazi Smith. I like him more than most people. And the reason I like him is because, you go back and when I was scouting Aiden Hutchinson and David Ajabu, it was a guy in the middle, number 58, who was occupying the blockers, who was allowing Aiden Hutchinson and David Ajabu to do all these great things on the edge. And I was like, who is this guy? And it was Mazi Smith. Mm-hmm. And, when I watched the film, I'm like, Michigan was able to do a lot of things that they were able to do because Mazi Smith was collecting double and even triple team blocks and clogging the middle of the field. And he's got some superior athleticism. We didn't see it before at the combine pro day workout because he's got a bad hamstring. But Bruce Feldman had reported on it before the season. The guy had run the 3-cone, I believe, under 7 seconds and had some insane 40 time for someone who's 323 pounds. So I like his upside. He's going to fall much further than he deserves to fall. He could be there for the Steelers in round 2. I spoke with somebody there. I spoke with somebody about the Steelers potentially taking him at 17. They said, not going to happen. They'll jump all over him if he's there in round 2. And he's going to be, again, one of those guys that down the road, we talked about Riley Moss before. People are going to wonder, how did this guy fall as deep, as deep into the draft as he did, in my opinion, anyway.
3 guys that are kind of in a cluster in the second or third rounds: Keanu Benton, Gervon Dexter, and Sake Ika. Which one? I know they all kind of a little bit different. Which one do you like best?
Well, for the Steelers, it would be Ika. I think Ika is their type of guy on the nose. He's a big space eater. I mean, he holds his point. They'll put 3 blockers on him, and you can't move him off the line of scrimmage. I think he is, that type of guy that the Steelers would really like. Benton is a guy, he's more of an athletic guy. I like him more in a 4-man line. And who was the other one that you mentioned?
Gervon Dexter out of Florida.
Yeah, Gervon Dexter. I like Dexter a lot as well. He's not, the space eater or gap occupier that Ika is, but he's very athletic. He's got good length at 6'5.5", 318 pounds. He's got some growth potential. He's just got to be more consistent. I do like Dexter a lot. I think, though, with the Steelers, round 2, if he's there in round 3, I think Ika is the better fit.
Okay. We'll flip to linebackers. I remember distinctly you brought up Nolan Smith the last time we talked. You were really high on him. And, man, you were 100% right. He killed the combine. Do you see him as a possible off-the-ball linebacker, or is it strictly edge for him?
No. I think, first of all, I'm glad you brought that up, and I'm going to want to raise for that. No, I mean, as I said during the combine, I tweeted out, really just to pigeonhole Nolan Smith as an edge rusher is doing Nolan Smith injustice. Mm-hmm. But you got to go back and you got to watch that 2021 film when Georgia won their first national championship, when they had Jordan Davis, Devin Wyatt, Trayvon, the first pick of the draft. They had 4 defensive players go in the first round, yet it was Nolan Smith who was the guy that was making plays left and right, forwards and backwards, all over the field. He wasn't just a pin your ears back guy, rush up the field. In my opinion, Nolan Smith is one of the most complete linebackers in this draft. Yeah, I like Trenton Simpson, but Nolan Smith is a much, much better pass rusher, and he's as good. Maybe Simpson's more athletic. He gets more depth on his pass drops, although not by much. If Simpson's much more athletic, he's a little bit quicker because he's smaller. But Smith is a complete linebacker. He's a complete 3-down linebacker. You can use him on the outside. You can use him up at the line of scrimmage as a pass rusher. You can stick him in the middle. And again, here's a guy that, if he was healthy and basically improved on his 2021 season, then had the combine he did, we're talking Nolan Smith as a potential top 10, top 8 pick. He's probably going to fall into late part of round 1. And again, a guy who has just got tremendous upside, an intelligent guy, a real leader. Love every aspect of his game.
Yeah, listening to him at the combine, you can't just help but love this guy, right? And I think for me personally, I think he's the perfect fit as an inside linebacker for the Steelers. He could run, he could tackle, he's a leader. I would love to. I had him in my last mock as the first round pick at 17. I love him.
Well, I mean, I can't disagree with you. Although in my mock, I have him, and I know Steelers fans are not going to be too happy about this. I actually have him going to the Baltimore Ravens.
Oh, don't do that to us, Jesus!
And I said, if I'm right about this pick, this will be comparable to the Baltimore Ravens taking Ed Reed, another guy who fell through the cracks and was just a tremendous player.
All right, you mentioned Trent Simpson. He's like Nolan Smith light, I think, just a little, not quite as good. Jack Campbell is more of a physical downhill kind of linebacker, right? Still tested pretty well.
Campbell complains. Yeah. Campbell, he is physical, but he's also smart. I mean, he tested better, ran the 4.65. Granted, it wasn't the 4.39 that Nolan Smith ran, but he plays fast, he plays smart, he plays disciplined football. He's a guy who immediately recognizes and diagnoses the act. He gets to the ball handler. He makes plays as efficiently in reverse as he does moving up the field. Yeah, I think he is very underrated as well. I think he's going to be a second-round choice, and I think he's going to be a starter on Sunday for a long, long time. if he's able to maintain his health.
One last linebacker that caught my eye. I was thumbing through the inside linebacker group. Owen Papo from Auburn ran a 4.3 40. I know he's a little bit raw, but what do you think about Owen Papo?
I don't think he's a little raw. I think he's a little bit small. I mean, he's 6 foot 1/2 inch, 225 pounds at the combine. I'm sure he put on about 5 to 8 pounds to get up to that 225. You know, when you compare him to Campbell, he's much better in pursuit. He's going to cover a lot more area. He's going to get from point A to point B quicker, and he's a guy who can run down ball carriers and backside pursuit. But he's a little bit slimmer. He's not as strong. He gets caught up in the trash. He's easily blocked from the action. I have Papo as a third-round choice. But again, if you're looking for an inside run and chase pursuit type of linebacker, I think it's a perfect position for him. He's the perfect player for you.
All right. One of the low-key Steelers needs, they need a slot receiver in the worst way. Their outside receivers are pretty good. The obvious name is Jordan Addison, right? You can see the connections. He played with Kenny Pickett at Pitt that one year, had a monster season. He seems to be sliding down the draft boards too, right? He's no longer like the top half of the draft type of guy.
Well, I mean, I think I had him in my mock. I've always had in my mocks going to the bottom half of round 1. I still think he's going to be a first round pick. I mean, 5'11", 173 pounds, runs a 4.49. You know, those computer numbers don't equate to a first round pick. But when you watch Jordan Addison the past 2 years, he plays like a first round receiver. He's got terrific hands. He runs outstanding routes. And, you know, the league is more now than just a 6'3", 215 pound receiver getting vertical to win out for the contested throw. You know, it's more than a guy that's just running 4.2s and running go routes because, you know, the cornerbacks are just as fast. It's receivers who can run sharp, crisp routes and separate through those routes. And that's what Jordan Addison does. And he does it very well. So I guess it's all relative. I never had Jordan Addison as an early first round pick. I've always had him in the bottom half of round 1. But, you know, if they're looking for slot receivers, they don't have to take one early. You're going to be able to get that sort of player, a good prospect, in my opinion, you know, on the third day of the draft. Trey Tucker of Cincinnati, one of my favorites, Demario Douglas of Liberty, who I think is going to be a sensational slot receiver return specialist. You'll be able to get him on day 3. Charlie Jones of Purdue is another one. So, you know, I mean, if it's a slot receiver they need, I'm gonna, you know, unless somehow, you know, a guy like Josh Downs slips to them in the 3rd round or something like that, and they're enamored with him, you can hold off and you can get that type of player. Jalen Cropper out of Fresno State in day 3, someone who can be a good slot receiver return specialist for you.
There's been some speculation they want a bigger slot, and they had Jonathan Mingo in for a visit. What do you think about Jonathan Mingo?
I mean, he's
a big guy, right? 220, I think.
And I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, Mingo's a second-round choice. Mingo's going to go earlier than people think. Mingo's a guy, in my opinion, he's a faster version of A.J. Brown. He's a terrific pass catcher, ran much faster than people expected at the combine. He's got sort of that funky body, 6'1.5", 220 pounds. So that is, you know, he's going to go in round 2. If you're looking for some other, you know, bigger slot receivers, maybe A.T. Perry of Wake Forest, 3rd round, maybe 4th round. I think he's going to go 3rd round, 6'1.5", 192 pounds. Excuse me. Tore up the Senior Bowl. You could not stop him at the Senior Bowl. Tested much better than people expected. Matt Landers out of Arkansas. Again, if you can think he's going to play in the slot. A guy who tested off the charts at the combine, ran a 4.38, 6'4.5", 200 pounds, has never been really productive. Played at 3 schools, played at Arkansas, Toledo, and I forget the first place he played at. But he's a well-traveled guy who never had great production. He's been more flash than he's been consistent. And really, I mean, Xavier Hutchinson, you know, from Iowa State, 6'2", 203 pounds, 4.54, runs great routes, consistent hands, consistently comes away with the contested throw. I mean, plays like a top 60, top 75 prospect, but the athleticism is going to push him down. If you're looking for a bigger guy, reliable guy to put in the slot, Xavier Hutchinson of Iowa State, someone they got to consider.
It's funny you brought him up because Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin made a kind of a surprise stop at Iowa State.
Yeah.
And it was either him or Will McDonald. There's been some speculation that he might need a 3rd edge. Well, they do need a third edge. There's no speculation about that. What do you think about Will McDonald as we wrap up?
I remember reporting on that. And then I think they took a private jet to Ohio State, which was the next day, which was the pro day that I attended. I may be mixed up in that, but I think that's the way it is. Will McDonald, he's a great athlete. He's been very productive, although he did not meet expectations last year. You watch him play and he just oozes production. He is basically a 3-4 outside linebacker. I think with Will McDonald, it's a situation where he's not going to be able to handle a lot of mental responsibilities. You're going to have to basically slim what you want him to do down. And if you do that, you're going to get a real good player.
All right, great. This has been great. Before I let you go, any low-key things that we don't know about that you saw Tomlin or Khan spend a little extra time with a prospect or even a Steeler scout or anything like that?
The only thing I'll say is, read what I wrote in my mock draft about Deonte Banks, about Mike Tomlin having an off-the-field relationship with Deonte Banks for a while now. Maybe as we get closer to the draft, I'll get a little bit deeper into it. And those relationships sometimes, I know, not sometimes, they go much deeper than people think because you already know what you're getting. And, you know the player. And my information is that Tomlin really likes Deonte Banks, the person, from that off-the-field relationship.
Excellent. That's good. That's good to hear. Tony, thanks a lot for coming on for us. I know it's a busy time for you. Check him out on the Pro Football Network. He's got his big board out, his mock draft out. It's good stuff. Good reading. Tony, thanks a lot for coming on the Steel Sanctuary podcast.
Thanks for having me again.
All right. That was Tony Pauline of the Pro Football Network. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. A lot of good stuff he gave us there. This episode was brought to you by Manscaped. Use the code SANCTUARY to get 20% off your order from Manscaped. It's men's grooming products. Me and my partner, David Korb, use them. They gave us a little care package. It's great, great stuff, guys. Check it out. Beard stuff, grooming stuff, anything you need for that type of thing. If you like this episode, please subscribe to the podcast, guys. We're doing really well now. We're getting more and more guests on. We've got this draft covered from head to toe. If you want all your Steelers news for the upcoming draft, subscribe to the Steelers Sanctuary podcast. Check us out on YouTube. We put all the podcasts on there, and we'll have some other stuff to go along with that. Check me out on Twitter at SteelersSank16. Check out my partner, David M. Korb, at M_Korb on Twitter. Until next time, thanks a lot, and thanks for listening to the Steelers Sanctuary podcast.